I just I just came in from giving my dog a good run. I've got a new Aussie Shepherd, and she's only a 2-year-old, and I tell you, she has to run, 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 run.
I believe it. I've got a blue heeler Australian Shepherd, and that dog is crazy.
Mine is a rescue. This is a funny story. So every fall, I live in Wayne County, very rural. I don't have garbage pickup. So every fall, I fill up my pickup and go to the Tri-County landfill about 45 miles away. And somebody dumped this dog there. And they'd had it for almost a week, posted it all over Facebook and said, "Do you want it?" And I said, "Yeah, oh, just what I've been looking for." And,
oh my gosh.
And she was skinny, but she was in great health. They said she was pretty full of cockleburrs when she arrived, but otherwise healthy. And on top of that, spayed.
Oh my goodness.
And the vet says she's 2 years old, never had pups, and is a purebred. Exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to raise a puppy. I wanted an adult. My Aussie that I had before died last year of a tumor, and she also was a rescue. And so I just couldn't, the goddesses were on my side. I couldn't be happier.
That's amazing. What is her name?
Sadie. And if you follow me on Facebook, I did finally put her on Facebook. So I have 3 cats and a dog. I'm turning into this little old lady. So at night, I found a bed for her, and she's by my bed sleeping. And then the one cat's at the foot of the bed, the other cat's at the head of the bed. And then the third cat, she sleeps in her own little bed. So the bedroom is quite full at night. So I'm not getting rain here. So I'm kind of upset. Thunder and lightning and names.
I just sent you a friend request, Mary Ellen.
We're all going to be curious about this dog when people.
I know. I want to see all about it.
They'll hear the latest on, this update.
No, I don't know if I can share a picture or not. I'm not that technical. So she's on Facebook.
Well, it's about 10:34. I'll keep letting people in as they join us. This is being recorded. So, Erin, I think we can get ready. If you and Chris are all set, I'm good on this end. So.
Well, welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you're with us. We are going to go ahead with our session 3 with our series on Lunch and Learn series on leadership and communication for impact. We are so glad that Chris Marion is here with us today. We're going to learn how to take our personal stories and the values that unite us and apply them to outreach and media opportunities. And we'll talk about how to construct letters to the editor, editorial pieces, speeches, social media posts, and podcasts. And we'll also learn how we want to prepare for interviews on the radio and television and newspaper as well. So it's so great to be with you again, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Well, I'm super psyched to be with you all. I was actually in Des Moines last week for the Women Food and Ag Network conference, and it was my first time there. And what a gorgeous city. My gosh, I just loved it. I stayed in the Fort of Des Moines Hotel or something, a fabulous hotel. And yes. It is wonderful. So thank you for welcoming me into your community. It's terrific. Well, I am really looking forward to part 3. This is probably the communications training part I get asked about the most, and that's getting yourself ready, being ready to interact with the media. And I think this is fun. We will probably crowdsource some information from you all too, but basically we're going to have a discussion about how we can be ready to talk to the press and our neighbors about the things we care about. So are we ready to roll?
We have, I'll jump in with just a couple of announcements really quick first, and then we'll be ready. Hold on, let me admit someone. Yeah, so just quickly before we get started, I want to remind everybody to join us next week. This time we'll be talking with Iowa State Senator Rita Hart. We've had this in the works for a while now, so we're excited to do a lunch and learn with the senator and take questions from you all. So my next thing, I have discovered one typo in this page, but I want to share it with you anyway. It is time to register for a convention, December 1st and 2nd in Storm Lake. Keynote speaker Art Cullen. We have a really cool authors panel planned, so many workshops. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat and you guys can go and read all about it and go ahead and get your early registration. There's a little discount if you register early. I think that's mostly everything I have. I will also drop the link to the recordings from past sessions of these in the chat, along with those supplementary workshops. You'll find that all on that page. So yes, so Chris, that's everything announcement wise, and you can go ahead and get started.
Well, that settles it. I'm definitely coming to your convention. Art Cullen is my hero. He is so fantastic. And I think that's a really great catch for you all, and should be a great time. So definitely sign up for that. All right, here we go. I'm going to share screen. And you all let me know if you can see a slideshow. Thumbs up. All right, wonderful. Just a reminder, we are here for Show Up, Speak Out, Leadership and Communication for Impact. We've been doing this, I think, something like every other or once a month on a Thursday. And we are heading into the final one next time. So we're going to conclude with taking your story to the streets, doing one-on-ones, and potentially running for office. That'll be our last session. That's going to be on November 2nd. And then you'll be heading into convention. And that QR code is if you want to sign up for convention right now from your phone. Go get a book signed by Art Cullen. Okay, so this is part 3, media readiness and outreach for impact. And some of y'all might recognize who is here right after we got off the last call. Julia sent me this photo on Facebook, and this was the television station saying that they were gonna interview Aaron about the drought, I think. How did that go, Aaron?
It went very well. We were able to get our message out about the impact that this is having on our farmers and what it means for us in the larger scheme of where things stand. So it went very well.
Do you have a link to the interview that Christina could drop into the chat? Did that end up? Did they like separate it out and post the link anywhere?
They were going to inform me about the link when they had it ready to go, and I haven't gotten that yet. So I'll have to dig a little bit to see if I can find it.
Yeah, that's great. It would be great to send this out to the group, and I would sure love to see it. So that was awesome. Thank you, Julia, for sending that over. That was fun. All right, just a reminder, we say this every time, but the world belongs to those who show up. Thank you for showing up today and being ready to present our values to the press and to everyone you talk to. We're going to do a little bit of preparation today so that when we show up, we can be most effective. Just a quick reminder of where we've been. We did discuss what our why, kind of our motivating heart value was, especially as it relates to agriculture and the food systems. We talked about the choice point that might be behind that why, the story, the moment, the turning point that happened to galvanize our values. We talked about how we can work that into an effective message, both short and long. And we talked about why UIFU. That was a lot of fun hearing those stories last time. And we are building all of those stories and exercises and time that we spent pondering our why into making messages in various forms. Last time we actually talked about writing and speaking, and you should have a lot of templates in the email that was sent out to help you take your small elevator pitch and work that into some bigger stories. Today, we're going to be talking about engaging with the media specifically. And then we are going to talk about civic engagement, running for office and doing one-on-ones with our neighbors in the next meeting. So just to put us in place, today we are going to focus on what I call the 3 power P's. That helps me remember them. I hope it will help you remember them. But the power P's are prepare, practice, and prune. And this is really the core of what we're doing here on this series, recognizing that when we practice and prepare, we can be most effective when we are given the opportunity to tell our story. The work of learning your why is really foundational to all that. You know, in high school and college, we all were asked to write stories and essays about various topics. But I think as adults, we are most effective at making change when we can tap into our own deepest passion. And so that's why we spent some time thinking about what our why was. And if you haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, we will put all of this into a packet that has all of the self-work exercises, all of the YouTube videos, and we'll get all of that into a package that you can review through the winter. It's always nice to have some homework to do over the winter. So the first step of being effective when talking with the press or when giving a speech, any kind of outreach, is understanding the assignment and knowing the audience. I think this is something that we shockingly skip a fair amount, I think, because it seems very easy and we kind of feel like it's not something we need to work on. But no matter how informal a situation may seem, you will set yourself up for success if you do a little bit of thinking through, what's my assignment or goal here? Who's my audience? And how can I prepare just the slightest bit to be ready to walk into any situation? When we are going to be on screen, like we all are today, or if we're going to be in person up front delivering a speech, or if we're going to be even doing a podcast, because sometimes those are also videotaped, we want to think through our clothes, just making sure that they are comfortable. And I know this seems like a really silly thing to put front and center, but if we are not comfortable in our skin and in our clothes, it can really throw a wrench in all of our good plans. So I think it's really important to think through clothes and shoes. If we're going to be out in the field, you know, Aaron was out there doing an interview next to a field of corn. You know, if that was me, I probably shouldn't wear my fancy cowboy boots that are slippery. I should probably be wearing my muck boots. But maybe I don't want to wear my old junky flannel that I wear to pull weeds. Maybe I want to look farmy, but not quite so farmy, if you know what I mean. So it's really good to think through who your audience is and what you might want to present, how you want to present yourself to that audience. Finally, no matter what situation you're going into, whether it's a one-on-one, you're going to meet somebody in a coffee shop, or if it's an interview, please do not be afraid to ask questions like, am I going to have a microphone? Am I going to be on screen? Am I going to, is there going to be food available? Or should I plan to bring a water bottle of my own? Ask questions about every situation and you'll just be that much more prepared. Something that I do if I'm presenting at a conference is I ask if I can get into the room early. If I'm going to do a podcast, I want to know what platform it's going to be on. Is it going to be recorded? If I'm doing a one-on-one, I'll ask, oh, is it just us, or will there be other people there? It's just good to be prepared. And I really want to encourage you to not skip that step of understanding the assignment. So let's talk through these 3 power P's, and then we're going to break them down sort of in templates per the situation. So first of all, we just talked a lot about knowing the assignment. Sometimes knowing the assignment is knowing your own personal goal. I think I told you all before, but my husband always asks me before I'm going to be on the radio, what's your 1 point? And it's really great to have to tell him what my 1 point is going to be, so that I am reminded of what is my goal. Because if you're like me and you just kind of like talking to people and you're sort of naturally curious about people, it's really easy to get off track from your own goal because you begin to engage with the interviewer, and you lose your own goal. Remember that when you're asked to do an interview, you are in control. Of course, the interviewer thinks they're in control, but you are providing them with an interview, and you need to remember that you're in control. So you need to know what your goal is. And of course, you got to know your audience. So if you are doing anything, and I mean anything from a podcast, which seems very casual, to a one-on-one, which seems even more casual, write out an outline, write out what your goal is. Even if it's a one-on-one with a neighbor, it's not a bad idea to write down what information would you like to exchange with this person today? What would you like to get across about your issues of the moment? And what would you like to hear about theirs? It just never hurts to write down an outline, even if it's just on your hand or one of these. I got these all over the place. And generally, you want to be in control of your 1 point that you want to make. Have some data for that 1 point, and never be afraid to get help. I once, some of you know Darren Von Ruden, he's the president of Wisconsin Farmers Union. At one convention, he made an amazing speech, and I went up to him afterwards to thank him, and he said, oh, well, that was all Danielle. Danielle was our communications director at the time. Of course, it wasn't all Danielle. He and Danielle worked together, and she wrote and polished the speech that he was going to deliver at convention. But there is no shame in getting help and being the best you can be by getting help. And Darren was completely unashamed to say that Danielle had written that for him, and none of us should be ashamed when we get help. Practice. Number 2, practice. If you're giving a speech, read it out loud. Read it out loud a couple times. Some of you may know Ann Schwagel. She's the vice president of Minnesota Farmers Union, and I was complimenting her once on a great job she did in a public hearing. And she said, well, I read it out loud 5 times to myself before I went up there. And beforehand, I did a bunch of deep breathing exercises. So there's nothing wrong with getting yourself in the right place and practicing, especially if something is timed. You definitely want to read it out loud multiple times, and maybe even record it to practice it. Test the tech. If you can get into a room early on, you want to make sure that everything's working the way you want it to work. We tested the PowerPoint today. Every single time I've been with you to do these webinars, I have had to do a Zoom update. And if I didn't do the Zoom update before I started my screen sharing, I would have had to get off and get back in order to present to you. So it's really important to run your tech. And thank you to Christina for suggesting that, because she was the one who made us do it. Try on your clothes, look in a mirror. One thing that's really effective is role playing with an ally, or an editor, if you're going to be doing a live interview. Finally, this is so important. Practice your pronunciations. Make sure you know how the interviewer's name is pronounced. Make sure you know that anybody you're going to mention, you have their name right. It just takes a couple minutes, but it's really important to do. And then finally, this is something that a lot of us struggle with, and that is prune. Anything you do needs pruning. There's nothing that you're going to write or prepare or set up or even think through that wouldn't benefit from a good hack. Those of you who raise berries or fruit know that that's the case, and it's the same in any kind of public presenting. Pruning is essential. Be ruthless, enlist a friend who is ruthless, and especially when we are talking about agriculture or policy, these wonky, dorky things that are very important to us, make sure that you are especially avoiding the curse of the expert. Don't use acronyms. Don't set up a scenario that people wouldn't understand unless they're in your world. Boil your facts down until they're very easy to eat, very easy to take in. And even though you want to present yourself as an expert, don't use language that only an expert could understand. I think Danielle Envik came up with this illustration. Boil the facts down till they're like maple syrup candy. Sweeter is better. All right, we practiced this before, but I'm bringing it up again just to remind you that your personal elevator pitch is the key nugget in every single exchange you're going to have with the media, or with your neighbors. If you're talking about an issue, you definitely want to have this down. If you haven't done some of the self-work to get it down in our last couple sessions, take some time to do this. It's really important. You're going to note that I mention this in every template. And this is just part of the pruning process. You want to have your own personal introduction, very short, so that you don't waste the time you have on camera kind of explaining yourself and your setting in a rambling way. Okay, we're not going to talk a lot about speeches, but speeches are one very common way we're going to have to get our issues across. So I just want to talk through this template briefly before we get on to interview, but because the speech and interview isn't completely different, not as different as you might think. A speech at its core is your elevator pitch, right? Your personal introduction. And then you take that introduction and you connect it to your audience through either a friendly story or a funny story, or maybe a sad story that will grab the audience and let them know that you are with them, that you are connected to them. Then you are going to make one point. Every speech should have one point. More than one point, it's going to be really hard to get it across. But your one point, which should be distilled in a sentence close to the top of the speech, should be backed up by 3 stories or 3 good, solid, compelling data points. You don't want to have more than 3 or so stories or data points. People will just get lost. After you present your stories to back up your point, you're going to say your point one more time. And then you are always 100% of the time going to make sure that you have a prepared ask connected to any letter to the editor, any speech, any presentation you do is always going to have that salient, timely, actionable offer or invitation to do something with you. Another reminder of how we tell a good story is we have the self part. That's our own personal nugget. Our choice point might be in there, and then we have to connect it to our audience. That's the us. And then finally, we always have the now, the ask that relates to bringing our audience in and asking them to act with us. So now this interview template should serve to get you through a lot of situations. I'm looking at this interview template as something you can use to get yourself ready for a podcast, ready for, oh my goodness, sorry about that, a live interview on television, a radio interview, anything that you might do with the media will benefit from you having prepared this template ahead of time. Once again, there's your elevator pitches in there. But when you're getting ready to develop an interview template, and these are just notes for you, you also want to get a little information in there that establishes your credibility to the audience. You want to practice the name of the interviewer. You want to be friendly and say, thank you for inviting me, Jeff, or whoever the person is. Some names are more complicated than others. And then you want to have up to 3 points, no more than 3 points, but you want to have ahead of time prepared 1 to 3 points that are written down and that you have data for, or a story for, or some way to back up those points. No matter what the interviewer asks, you are going to talk about these points. Now, I've run for office a couple times, so I've gotten very good at spinning an interview to be able to say what I want. But if you watch interviews, you will see good interviews. The best people are able to bring the conversation around to what they care about, no matter what. And it's really important that you write these points down and that you have practiced them and that you are ready, because you want to be in the driver's seat of any interview. And the only way to do that is to have prepared ahead of time. You can practice with some role play with a friend, spinning things so that you can always bring them back to your points. That can be kind of a fun thing to do with your friends who are also geeky about policy and ag activism. And then if you are in a longer form interview, you also want to have some rebuttals prepared so that if the interviewer wants to challenge some of your points, you have something to rebut any challenge. So that takes some thinking through. I learned this method from a friend of mine. I'm in a hotel room, so I don't have any envelopes here with me, but I'm talking about a literal envelope here. Scott Ross, who is a Wisconsin writer who used to be with a group called One Wisconsin Now that did opposition research to basically conservative points. So he was a liberal researching and rebutting conservative narratives. He taught me how to do this elevator, this envelope, and I have used it a million times. Now, if you think about a business envelope, it's about the size of a cell phone, maybe a little bit longer. I have a stack of these on my desk at home, and I use them all the time when I'm getting ready for interviews. What's going to be on this envelope is not your elevator pitch, because your elevator pitch should be memorized. You should have that down cold, the way you're going to introduce yourself. And I will say, and Aaron, you can back me up on this, see if this happened in your interview. But the first thing that most reporters ask you is, can you just tell me your name and what you do? Now, that's going to be 2 lines, but that is an invitation to say a lot more than your name and what you do. You can easily get across your 3-line elevator pitch, and more than likely that will end up being in the recorded interview, because the reporter wants to know your name, and they'll often ask you to spell it, but they also want to know who you are, what you do. And that is a tremendous opportunity to launch an interview, and I don't want you to miss that opportunity. So it's really important that you have your elevator pitch down, but it's not going to fit on an envelope. The envelope is for other things, but make sure that that elevator pitch is either typed into your phone or you've written it on an index card and you've practiced it going into any interview situation. And Aaron gave us a great elevator pitch last time around an issue that he cared about. And I didn't prep him ahead of time. He was ready to go with it. Okay. The other thing the thing that's going to be at the top of the envelope is the name of the interviewer. That's going to be at the very top, so that you can be very comfortable in saying, thank you for having me here, Angelique, something, so you can be very friendly and comfortable. And then right next to their name, put a big smiley face, because you want to remind yourself to take a breath and smile. Even if you're on the radio or a podcast, if you're smiling, your voice is going to be more welcoming. It's going to draw people in. So just remind yourself to smile. Then on that envelope, you're going to have an outline of 3 points. And these are up to 3 points, but the 3 points that you are going to make, again, no matter what is asked. Now, I don't mean that you will completely ignore a question, but I'm saying that these 3 points are so solidified in your mind that you are going to get them out one way or another. Practice makes perfect. You'll get better at this the more interviews you do. Finally, you want to just put a sketch. You might not have room to write this on the envelope, but you want to know some stories and some data that backs up those 3 points. And then you want to have those answers to a potential opposition argument. You want to jot those down on your envelope too. Now, an envelope, if you think of my phone here, I can hide an envelope in front of me. You know, I can have it right in front of me when I'm on a podcast, if it's on Zoom. Even if you are doing an in-person recorded interview, you could have a very small, you can have an envelope in front of you and it's not that noticeable. So just a suggestion. I think the envelope method is fantastic. So to wrap up some points about becoming media savvy, one is try and always say yes to interviews. I say yes to almost any opportunity to be interviewed, whether I feel like my farm is ready or I am ready. I will get myself ready. And the more you say yes, the more often the media will reach out to you. You've probably noticed that in most media outlets, the same people are asked to be the experts on things. And that's because you're in the Rolodex, you're in the spreadsheet about you're an expert on this or that topic. It's important to say yes, but not necessarily right at the moment. If I get a call from a reporter, I will rarely say, sure, I can talk right now. I almost always make an appointment for later in the day if it's very timely. Even if it's in 15 minutes, it gives me a chance to take a deep breath, do a quick envelope, and just gather myself. But please consider always saying yes and just doing it on your terms. Then we've got the 3 Ps here: prepare, practice, and prune. Trial the tech, whatever the tech may be. And by tech, I would also include clothing in there. Be sure to be in control of the conversation. Have your facts written down. If they're very specific facts, you definitely want to have them written down. Having a double screen, if you're doing a Zoom, is a great way to have lots of facts and figures in front of you and not have that distract you when you're doing a Zoom. Avoid jargon. This is an interesting one. Even though you're generally being asked to do an interview because you're the expert, do not be afraid to say, I don't know the answer to that question. That's okay. Better to say you don't know than to ramble on, because when we don't know, we tend to ramble, and that's not ideal. Finally, don't worry about it being perfect. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be things you wish you did differently. But I will say, if you prepare ahead of time, the most you can, then in this situation, you're going to be able to be your most authentic self. And your authentic self is what draws people in. Your authentic self is what makes you have fun on an interview. And when you're having fun, it's compelling. Perfection is really not the goal. You know, a few uhs and ahs, that makes you a real person. And the more you prepare, the more real you can be in the moment and the less stilted. So finally, right before any in-person opportunity, whether you're sitting in the car or you're about to pick up the phone or you're about to hit that join button on the Zoom, take a moment and do 3 deep breaths. Breathe in through your nose for 3 seconds and breathe out through your mouth for 3 seconds, and do it 3 times. And that will just slow your heart rate down, bring some oxygen into your brain. And, you know, maybe you want to get the wiggles out and do a few shakes too. Okay, now I'm going to share with you an interview that just happened. But before we do that, I want to ask Aaron if he'd be willing to share how you prepared for the interview you just had about the drought. Or no, well, that was about the Farm Bill, right?
Actually, I think the one that we were looking at maybe was about the government shutdown. That was pending.
Yes, very timely. How can you tell us how that went? How people reached out? How did it all go? And how did you prepare?
Yeah, and sometimes you never know exactly how people get your name, but some folks reached out from a local TV station. This particular producer reporter was someone who wasn't an Iowa person, but had actually done some good homework, and had some good questions prepared. So when I learned that it was about the government shutdown, I immediately went through my notes and said, okay, what are the three main things I want to get across about what a government shutdown would mean for farmers who are using the USDA offices? And I came up with a list about 5. And I thought, I can't say 5 things. That'll be too confusing. Let's cut it down to 3 things and have my top 1 that I want to get across. And so I pruned that down. And then I also thought about what do I want to emphasize about farmers? Well, this is a very busy season, and it's all the more frustrating for farmers to deal with a shutdown when they've got too much other things to do. And we work hard, and we expect our government to work hard for us. So it's important to keep it going. So I tried to not just stick to the facts, but say, why is this important to us?
I love that. So what I heard you say was you got a call somewhat out of the blue, but then you went to notes. You had some notes. Why did you have notes about the shutdown?
Well, I got these notes from our farmers union updates. If folks haven't signed up already, not only do you get information from the Iowa Farmers Union, but you can also access the National Farmers Union, and you get an update on the news every single day. And you'll get updates on national farmers. So that's where I got these specific ones. Because that morning I read through my notes, and it highlighted those things.
That's fantastic. So to me, that points to, we may be being reached out for because we're the subject matter expert. That doesn't mean we have to make up all the information ourselves, right? I mean, Aaron went to a trusted source. All of us in the Farmers Union have the Farmers Union to lean on. If you're asked to do an interview, I am quite sure that Christina or Deborah or somebody would be willing to talk you through, or maybe even send you a white paper or something boiled down. Don't feel like you have to be a Lone Ranger out there. You are the hero of the interview. You are the person that they want to talk to, but you don't have to make up all the information yourself. Please lean on the people you know, and get help. And of course, Farmers Union wants their members to succeed and be in the news. So they are ready and waiting to help you out. Anything else? Were you on your own farm? Did you like scope out the setting first, Aaron, or how did you end up in that place on the side of the road there?
So actually, that I'm glad you brought up the point about your farm does not have to be perfect. Our farm is not perfect. It's certainly one of the times when the farm is at its most cluttered is during harvest season. So we chose a place where it was a nice, easy background, some growing corn, standing corn. So I kind of chose that, and they said, oh, that's perfect. We're fine with that. And so even though it was out of the blue and it would have been easy to say it can't work because the farm's not perfect. Usually you can find a nice part of your farm or out in the countryside or wherever you're at that is perfectly suitable for these purposes. So I'm glad it worked out, because it really does. Most of the time these folks want to do something that looks good on camera. They want to make you look presentable and make their broadcast as presentable as possible.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Generally, unless you're in the middle of a political campaign or some kind of investigation into something you did that was illegal, the press is not there to make you look bad. They're there to work with you. And I think it's really important to think of whoever's interviewing you, whether it's a friend doing a podcast or someone that you have never heard of, you're a partner in this story. and you're a full partner. So it's important to not turn control over. Aaron recognized that things were not looking everywhere great on the farm. So he found a great spot. And generally, if you do a little bit of thinking, you can suggest questions to an interviewer. You can send them your bio so that they know what you have to offer. You can tell them you can even tell them what you'd like to talk about. You can do as much preparation and suggesting and partnering as you want. And I want to really encourage you to feel like you are a partner in any media opportunity. It's not something you have to passively go along with. Does anyone else have an example of a time they were interviewed and what they did to prepare or didn't do to prepare? Bad stories are also good because we can learn from them. Anybody else have something they want to share for the good of the group?
I know folks will have some good stories because some people on this call, I know I've done some great stuff in this space. One analogy, Chris, that I really take to heart sometimes is that, these interactions are kind of like making pancakes, right? Your first, you can do everything to prepare to make your first pancake, but your second and third one might be a little bit more refined. So just doing just a teeny little bit of practice might get that first pancake out of the way, and then your second and third ones go much smoother, and you're off to a delicious breakfast and a good interview.
Absolutely, that's really true. And if you don't follow a recipe for pancakes, they're probably not going to turn out. So it's really good to prepare. But just know that doesn't guarantee a seamless home run every time. I'd sure love to hear some stories, but anybody want to jump in? Oh, please, Deborah, jump in.
Hey, I was at the state fair this year, behind the table as usual in our booth in the ag building, and a guy comes up and he has someone with him, another guy. And he starts talking to me, and I knew I recognized him, but I couldn't immediately think where. And we kind of have a little bit of joking. And then he says, well, I'd like to interview you. Can I do that? And I said, oh, okay, sure. And it was Sean Spicer, and the former press secretary for the Trumpster. And, I wasn't prepared. It wasn't something that I anticipated happening. And afterwards, I really had to think about what I'd said. Did he lure me into anything that because behind the table, I have a policy. You could talk about policy all you want, but you can't get political. And I wonder, I just had to really run that through my brain, because he kind of he talked about transgender. They're all, worried about someone coming into their bathroom, whatever. And I made a joke about him being portrayed by a woman on Saturday Night Live. But, I really had to think that through. So my advice based on this experience is don't let yourself get caught up in it. Take a breath, sort of think about what's going on and, go with it, but really be conscious of what you're getting into.
Anybody else? All right, well, we're going to watch this clip. This happened, I think. Is someone talking? Okay, we'll watch this clip and then we'll see if anybody else has any other advice they want to give to the group in terms of preparing or practicing or pruning when you're getting ready to interact. So I am gonna go to, can you all see this?
Yeah.
Thumbs up if yes, and then let me know how the
Plants
sound is.
Association says there are nearly 150
Sound?
species of invasive plants in Wisconsin. The species can threaten our health and our economy.
They can also destroy our natural landscape. Today, Wisconsin Women in Conservation hosted an invasive species management workshop at Schmeekley Reserve in Stevens Point. News Channel 7's Sloan Wick went to the workshop. Sloan, to make sure we're all on the same page, what are invasive species?
Absolutely, Cassandra. Invasive species are any type of non-native life that can do harm to us or the environment. Here in Wisconsin, some of the more common invasive species we see are buckthorn, garlic mustard, and wild parsnip. But more and more non-native plants can be introduced every day.
Where do I start? It's really bad. You start where it's not bad.
As people travel more, invasive species travel more as well.
With the mobility in our culture today, we come in from all over all the time.
Christine Klessig is a landowner with a passion for conservation. That passion includes keeping invasive species off her property.
I've made a personal pledge not to have any from my house down to where my mailbox is.
But even she learned something at the workshop.
Yeah, you can use buffers. You can use it.
I learned that what I thought was a regular plant is actually an invasive species. So I need to get out there and get that.
Invasive species don't just overtake our natural landscape, they also overtake our budget.
Those things can continue to encroach on cropland so that it's hard to grow things. Well, that would increase our food costs. If things are in the water and they need to be controlled, that could increase utilities costs. Utilities companies having to get in and clear brush a lot more. All of those things get passed on.
If invasive species take control, many beloved native plants and animals could die out. Klessig says it's our duty to keep Wisconsin beautiful and native.
We have a responsibility to do that to future generations. We need to be good stewards of our planet.
Wisconsin Women in Conservation will host 3 more invasive species workshops this month in various Wisconsin cities. The dates and times for those are linked on our website, wsaw.com.
Okay. So this is Christine. She is one of the women I work with in my project in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Women in Conservation. And this particular day was a field day. It was on invasive species, but it was also on developing a conservation plan. It was a 4-hour day. The reporter, a young woman, Sloan, she followed us around and did interviews for about 3 of those hours. And this 2-minute spot is what was produced from there. I knew she was coming. I didn't quite know what her emphasis was going to be. And I didn't have time to reach out to any particular landowner or participant and to ask them to be an interview. So Christine, I pulled her out of the learning circle where we were all talking and learning about tools. And I asked if she would do a quiet interview with this reporter. So she had no preparation. And but she was completely poised and did a great job. And I'm going to be honest and say that I picked Christine because I thought she looked great. She had colorful clothes on. I knew she was going to stand out on camera, and she is our most experienced conservationist in the group. So I knew that she could come up with some good information. I think she did a beautiful job. Myself, on the other hand, I did not expect to be on camera, but just the way the day played out, this reporter wanted me to talk at the end, and I did not have a ton of information at my fingertips about invasive species. So I completely punted. I was not delighted with the interview, but I would say I think it turned out just fine. Also, it was like an 85-degree day. It was very hot and sweaty. We had just gotten done with the field day when she interviewed me, and she asked me to take my hat off. And I was completely dismayed because my hair was all sweaty and my bangs were like stuck to my head. So I was like flustered on so many levels, but I think it turned out fine. So I show this as an example. just so that we realize that things are not always going to be perfect, but saying yes is really important. And I do think that our project and the issue of invasive species got a really nice piece out of this. So I am curious if that jogged any memories, or if anybody else wants to share either a positive or negative or just some great advice. Mary Ellen, I was hoping you would chime in because I know you have some experience.
One of the comments I wanted to make, because as it's illustrated in this picture, cameras are not our biggest friends. And if we just stand up straight, they make us look like we're leaning backwards. So I always tell women, especially, lean in to the camera. Just remember the title of that book, right? Lean in. It feels a little awkward, but you can see she's tilted forward and her head is tilted into the camera. So it comes out perfect. And it's just one of those little tricks that really help make a video or a picture much better. So treat the camera as a friend. And you can tell she's also looking at the interviewer. Her expression is great. Her eyes are so engaged. And she just was probably a natural in front of the camera.
Yes, thank you. She did marvelously. And I think one of the things, and this is for women primarily, if you care about your appearance on camera, a little bit of lipstick goes a long way, because our lips do disappear. So anyway, that's a tip that I was told many years ago. So let's see. I'm loving this. Brad, tell us what you got.
Yes, there's my sound is on. I had this example, and I've actually posted a link in the thing over there. But anyway, an interesting story of George Naylor, prominent family farm activist here in Iowa, being interviewed on MSNBC. This was during a convention of the Iowa CCI. And anyway, one of the things that came out to me very dramatically was, what do you do if the interviewer doesn't know what the questions are? So the basic issue is, George was there to talk about the core issues of the Farm Bill. One example would be the National Farmers Union Farm Bill proposal, which eliminates the need for subsidies and just manages market with price floors and supply management. And so the interviewer only wants to talk about subsidies. And this is just seen everywhere, that everything, all the issues, what's good, what's bad, what would a transformative farm bill be? And it's all framed as subsidies, even though that's not transformative. It leaves in place, the cheapest to cheap farm prices and so forth. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that question. You did say, hey, you can change the questions or suggest different questions. I noticed that, and that you don't need to answer the question they ask. That's another point you made. And I appreciate all this, by the way. But I don't know if anybody has any further questions, but that's the point I wanted to make.
Well, I'm going to send a clip in our follow-up materials that my friend Scott Ross, who I mentioned with the envelope method, I'm going to send you a clip of him on, I think he was on MSNBC. And once you're looking for it, you can clearly see how he's taking a question and turning it to his advantage. You can also see there's two people, a conservative and a liberal, being interviewed, and they both have their hands folded in front of them. And both of them, you can tell, have note cards inside their hands. So I think it's really important to be okay with having some notes. Everybody's doing it. Just practice ahead of time where you're going to hide them. Let's see. Karen Varley, please.
Thank you, Chris. I want to comment on the note I put in the chat about Toastmasters. I've been a member of Toastmasters for quite a while. I love it because we are all there to help each other, no matter what stage of comfort we are with public speaking. We get chances to do prepared speeches. So we do that preparation and that pruning and that practice. And another thing is that we practice off the cuff, spontaneous answers to questions. When Brad mentioned just now, and you also did earlier, Chris, about transitioning to what you want to talk about, that's something that we work on. You may get a question that you know nothing about, you don't want to address, and we practice finding a way to get to something that we do feel comfortable talking about. And just like Erin said, the more practice, whether it's pancakes or speaking, the more comfortable you are and the better you'll get. There are clubs all over. I can connect you with one, or you can just look online at toastmasters.org. Most meet remotely as well as in person, so you get opportunities wherever you are.
That's wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up. I was at a field day just this past week, and I recorded someone who was talking about conservation, and she did such a beautiful job. It was off the cuff. She was just chiming in, and I went up to her afterwards and said, I recorded that. I hope it's okay if I use it. It was such a marvelous wrap up of what we were talking about. And she said, well, I've been doing Toastmasters for 10 years. And it was so powerful. But you don't think of Toastmasters as the top tool for community organizing or advocacy, but really just doing that kind of practice means you're going to be ready in any situation at all. And that's so important. Thank you so much. Robert?
Yes, hi. First, I want to thank you. I thought all of that advice was really, really good. This is in part response to Brad's, that a lot of times when you're on the national shows, you get a chance to frame your questions in the discussion with the producer at the beginning. When they call you, you can engage and with the producer. And one thing that I want to say with the national media, that you can say yes, but if they say now, you really got to go with it. One time I had something in the New York Times, and MSNBC wanted me, and so did Tucker Carlson. And I said, no, I can't do it tonight, but I can do it tomorrow night. So I was booked tomorrow night. I was training somebody at one of our radio stations. And that night was the Orlando Pulse shooting. So the next night never came for me. And so if it's a local person, sure, you don't have to do it right now. But if you ever get a chance to speak nationally, you need to make the most of it, because it might not come back. But thank you. It's all great.
I think that's a really good point. I think my main point there was just say yes, and then do what you need to do to get yourself comfortable and prepared. But don't feel like you're on the hook to immediately do it right then. Well, I'm just going to it looks like that everybody has chimed in who wanted to. I know we're at time, so we should wrap up. I didn't want to go to that. But I just wanted to remind you that we've got one more of these, and we're going to really focus on the community organizing skill of doing one-on-ones. And we're going to talk about running for office, which, believe it or not, is just a larger version of doing one-on-ones. So I really have enjoyed being with you. Please don't hesitate to reach out at all if you have questions. And as usual, Christina and I will send out a follow-up to this with some great resources and some videos to watch. And see you next time.
Great seeing everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.